So we learned that for a person to be able to experience the highest revelation of Torah, they need the greatest amount of wealth. Now it's interesting, and we've spoken about this many times, nobody speaks stronger against the pursuit of wealth than Rabbi Nachman. He calls it avodah zarah mamash. And yet, over here, he seems to be implying, while that's true, if you have it, you'll be able to experience the Torah at a much higher level. In fact, to get to the highest levels, you need all the wealth in the world. So through this lesson, we're having to try to figure out, how do we reconcile that? What is the wealth that he's speaking about? How come he doesn't say money? He doesn't say you need all the money in the world. Mammon. He says you need all the wealth in the world. He says in Pirkei Avot, who's a person who's wealthy?
Who's happy with his life.
So maybe he just means you have to have the greatest level of joy. Right? And in Kabbalah, they explain that Chokhmah and Bina are two lovers that never depart. Chokhmah represents the highest degree of emet. It's the revelation of the light of the Ein Sof. Bina is the place of simcha, it's the place of joy, it's the heart. Why is it important that there are two levers that never depart? Because it's joy that unlocks the truth, the mind. If you don't have happiness, you also can't have truth. And if you have truth, you must have happiness. They go together. I told you guys the story of the chassid who was accosted by somebody telling them a story of someone in the Beit Din, some court case that they overheard. And the greatest minds in the generation couldn't come to a conclusion about what's the din in this situation, what's the judgment here. And he told this, innocent, seemingly not so knowledgeable in Torah chassid, this story. I don't know if they were at a wedding, a bar mitzvah or something. He was just schmoozing with him. And the chassid said back to him very naively, I think this is the answer. He goes, what do you mean this is the answer? I just told you that the Beit Din couldn't figure it out. How do you think you know the answer? He goes, I don't know how to explain it to you, but just you're going back there, they're from your town, tell them what I told you and see if it's the answer. And he was mad. How could this guy be so stupid that he thinks that he knows the answer? It's and now, but I'm on the other hand, he seemed pretty sure, so he's going back. And he's fuming and going to the Beit Din to tell him, and he tells them. And the Beit Din looks at him and they said, okay, we need to convene, we need to speak about it. He's sitting waiting, and then they convene and they come back out and they said, that was the answer. That's the teretz. Who told you that? So all of a sudden he runs back to that town to ask how this guy, what is he, a hidden tzaddik? How does he possibly know the answer to this thing? So he said back to him, I'll tell you how I know, or I thought I knew. As soon as the answer popped up in my head, as you were speaking to me about it, it made me happy. And because it made me happy, I knew it was true. Okay? Now, this is a very cute story, very feel-good story, but it's a very deep story. Because Rabbi Nachman explains that freedom unlocks the mind. And in Kabbalah, the word cherut, freedom, is a code word for bina, which again is simcha, which is why Rabbi Nachman says elsewhere that we're going to go out in joy. Right? It's let's do it with the heart. It's a place of freedom. The Torah was given on tablets. Those tablets represent the heart. Rabbi Nachman speaks about the month of Tammuz. It's a broken heart, broken tablets, right? So it has to do with the freedom of the heart that allows a person's mind to be unlocked, which is why Rabbi Nachman's focus so much is on the heart and not on the mind, because he understood that for you to access your mind, you actually have to heal your heart, which is why, let's say you see Chabad Hasidus and they like very much to kind of poo-poo on a lot of Hasidus because they say, oh, it's emotional, whereas we are intellectual. This is a higher level. This is for people who they're not so well or whatever. And someone went to the Ohel once. I was in Queens, and he was really on fire with Breslov Hasidus. He's a ger and he's Hispanic, so they have a lot of faith naturally. It was the perfect combination. Once he hit Rabbi Nachman, it was talk to Hashem. I've been doing that my whole life. So all of a sudden he goes to the Ohel. And
call him a different name at that point.
Right. And the chassid there, the Chabad chassid there, said to him, "Oh, do you learn any Torah?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'm actually learning Chassidut right now. I'm learning Breslov Chassidut." So he goes, oh, he goes, oh, we're just like that. We're just like Breslov, but we're normal, or like
So we're not like Breslov.
yeah, something like that. We're like that, but like our feet are on the ground. He said something to that effect. We're not like flying. I was so upset. I spent like hours trying to explain, how there's like no. It's like things that people say, like there's just like things that people say, and then it starts being said to everybody, and then everyone just says it. It's one of those things. There's nothing further from the truth. There's no more das in any Torah than there's the das in Rabbeinu's Torah. The Arizal says that Moshe Rabbeinu, the Tzaddik Emet, he represents the das of Zer Enpin. He's like the living manifestation of das. We call him the Nachal Navea Makor Chochma. He's the source of das, of consciousness, right? He says that what his Hasidim will be able to intuit through their imagination, he knows through his das. This whole thing is das. However, how do you get to the das? Rabbi Nachman says you got to heal your heart. You got to heal your heart. And the reason why is because in Kabbalah, Chokhmah is reflected through Bina. So you have no way to just perceive Chokhmah as it is. Like in the first Torah, Moharan, Rabbi Nachman says that you need Chokhmah. You need to look for the Chokhmah and everything. This represents this tremendous ore, this tremendous light. But because this light is so big, you can't look at it directly. You need to have it reflected and refracted through some type of mechanism, which he says is the moon or Malchut.
So you head on if you just try to go to fix up the chokhmah, so to speak.
You need the chokhmah to fix you, but you can't look.
You can't fix it on it.
You can't look at the chokhmah.
You can't fix it. Like you can't just say, "Oh, I'll learn shas and posting, and then
no,
everything's fixed."
No.
As we all figured out.
Right, as we all figured out. Right.
Took us some time.
No, because that light, Rabbi Nachman says, is too intense. It's like the light of the sun. So you need sunglasses. Those sunglasses are malchut. They represent your level of faith. They represent your level of humility. They represent your level of bittul, right? Those are all like part of the malchut, and that's the vessel through which you can receive the chokhmah. But really, it's all bound up in the heart, because all the 7 lower sfirot are really the 7 elements of bina, of the heart. So when you're working on anything within yourself, emotionally or psychologically, you're always working on the heart. And because we need to fix the heart. The leiv is what's broken. And that's why Rabbi Nachman says that when Mashiach comes, the leiv of stone is going to turn into a leiv of flesh, which means the heart's rectified. Now it's going to be able to perceive the light of Hashem, which is Chokhmah. So all this is to say that if you try and just cogitate on godly matters, you will never experience healing in your life. Because you can't just focus on the chokhmah. You have to have a mechanism which contracts that light for you. That is through your heart. But for you to be able to do that effectively, your heart needs to be whole, which is your whole life's work, right? The healing of the broken heart. That's what we're here for. That's what Rabbi Nachman is here to help us do. Did you want to say something? So now Rabbi Nachman comes to explain that how does one achieve this wealth, which now we're not sure what it is. I threw us for a loop, right? We've been spending weeks thinking he was talking about money, and now you guys have already stuffed up your bank accounts and made a whole new plan for how you're going to do a new job next year and like fix, But then like, okay, maybe he's not even talking about money. Oh, that makes more sense because Breslovers don't really have so much money. And like, okay, so then he goes on to explain. For you to be able to achieve that level of wealth, you need to lengthen your days. So what does that mean? So in Kabbalah, they explain there's the highest level in Kabbalah, which is called Arach Anpen. But within that highest level, there's a highest level. What's the highest level? The highest level? It's called Atik. Atik Yomin. We sing it at the third meal. And it's very, very haunting. It's like this haunting, beautiful song. It means ancient of days or length of days. So the whole point of Chassidus is to take Kabbalistic concepts and let you live with them practically, because that's what draws blessing into your life. So in this case, what does it mean for me to have Atik Yomin, to have length of days? It means literally to make the most of your day. If you take each hour of your day and you make the most of it from the point of spirituality or kedusha, right? You add to that hour with more kedusha, you are lengthening your days. Okay, this is the main. So if once you do that, Rabbi Nachman says that will bring in that wealth. That wealth will now allow you to think about the deepest concepts in Torah. Okay, but I think all of us have been sufficiently prompted by rabbis for many years now to be solely focused on spirituality and to learn as much as possible and to pray as much as possible and to be boded as much as possible, to be alone with Hashem. Okay, say Tehillim and look at the tefillot and all, a million other things, which I'm sure we're all doing perfect on, right? Now, you'll notice it's hard to do that. And even maybe when you do that, you burn out. Maybe you did it for like a day and you're like, okay, I'm back in it, I'm doing it again. And then
2 days later,
yeah, you're done. Okay? So what's the problem? Sounds like Rabbi Nachman was just telling me it's like a matter of will. But then he comes in and he says, you can't just add Kedusha to your days. You need to first have some type of key to unlock your ability to do that. Which Rabbi Nachman says the key to being able to add length of days is this thing called yira, awe. Like those moments in your life that you really felt Hashem. Maybe when you had a child for the first time, or maybe you finally got a job after you were unemployed for a long time. Maybe you had a health scare and all of a sudden you came out of it. Whatever. Everyone has mini miracles, which are really major miracles. Some people have major miracles, which are just like the mini miracles. And everyone has something if you pay close enough attention. When you feel that, or maybe it's just Shabbos, you feel awe. Like those moments that you realize that Hashem is running your life, you feel this is awesome. That's literally what awesome means. Awesome means like this thing is making me feel awe. But it's not awe of I'm debilitated now, I'm dysfunctional now. It's not anxiety like I'm used to experiencing so often. It's talking about peace. It's a level of shalom, right? Where there's awe, there's peace, the Zohar says. That's Yerushalayim. Wherever you'll find awe, the Zohar says, you're going to find shalom. Yerushalayim. Yira, shalom. You're going to find peace. Okay? So, to be able to add Kedusha to your days in a way where you're actually able to, and not just able to, but you're able to sustain, and it's able to make you happy, because Rabbi Nachman doesn't want you to become a religious fanatic. He says it explicitly in Sichot Haran. The worst thing you could do is be fanatical. Obviously, we have to figure out, because he says there that secular people are the most fanatical people that they are. So what would look like would be moderate for them, and that like you would be fanatical. He might just think that being religious is normal, right? But even within that, Rabbi Nachman is saying there's no reason for you to go over the top in anything. So then,
Rabbi Nachman said, found out about it. Slow down. Run out and tell everybody.
Yeah, they said you're not going to help anybody.
Just stay and keep it quiet.
Yeah, many places. But on the other hand, there's nobody who encourages you to do more than Rabbi Nachman. So how is all that? And it all depends on your level of yira. The more awe you have of Hashem, the more you're a vessel to be able to experience higher levels of Kedusha and Torah. Like the Gemara says, and the Midrash says, that Torah is like the inner chamber. And the outer chamber, or let's say the lock to the entrance, is Yirat Hashem. So if a person learns a lot of Torah, but he doesn't have Yirat Shemayim, it's like he has the inner keys, but he doesn't have the outer keys. So what's the benefit of the inner keys? There is none. You never got there. Other places Rabbi Nachman explains, based on a Gemara, which says that the man has to pursue the woman, which we know, according to Rabbi Nachman, everything in Shas is really deep. So in this case, in Kabbalah, women represent Yira, they represent awe, whereas men represent Chesed, kindness. So Rabbi Nachman says in Sefer Midot, when you have a son, kindness is going to be drawn into your home. Because Kabbalistically, we come from the right side, women come from the left side. Which is why it says that wealth comes from your wife and honor comes from your wife, because that's all left side kind of stuff. Okay? So here, It says for a man to pursue the woman and not for a woman to pursue the man. What's the import for us? That if you look for love of Hashem, or you look for Torah, you might find it, and you may not. But if you look for Yirat Shamayim, because it's the woman, automatically you're going to find Torah and love of Hashem. Why is that? Because the man's always pursuing his wife. Or in this case, love is always pursuing Yira, awe of Hashem. So then the obvious question is, okay, this is great. It sounds like everything so far. And then he adds one more point is, and you have to at the very least make sure you're not doing something which is causing you to become poor or impoverished. Which in this case we learned had to do with Pagama Brit, right? Like we said last class. If you never know the answer to what Rabbi Nachman's saying, the answer is Pagama Brit. There's something wrong, Pagama Brit, right? Okay. This causes you to become poor. Now, what we're saying now is it could be that poor of joy, poor of simcha. You become impoverished in that space. Because Rabbi Nachman says elsewhere that Pagama Brit and depression go hand in hand. They're very interconnected, right? So at the very least, you have to make sure that you're really holding in a good place here because you can't become wealthy while you're simultaneously becoming poor. So you have to, at the very least, make sure you're not becoming poor of your own volition. And now we're going to work on building wealth over the course of time, steadily, slowly, okay? Through Yira. Good. This is where we're up to now. Now the question is obvious. What's the question?
What's what? We spoke about that.
Okay. What's the more pertinent question?
How do you get Yira?
How do you get Yira?
Oh.
Very good. Way to make all of us look bad that you come fresh off the boat in America, you haven't been here for any of the classes.
Is we going to talk about the entire Aleph? Yeah.
And what does it say?
How to find Yira.
How you do it?
There's three things. There's three areas to avoid and three chagim that refine it. Right?
Yep.
So he says, I think, to avoid Tavis Moharan, Niyuf, and Achila, right? And the chagim is Shavuos, Pesach, and Sukkot. And each one is connected to one of those.
Mm.
Does this have anything to do with that?
It does. Because it's easy to say that as a teacher because everything has to do with everything.
Yeah, but also the Chai say that one Torah has nothing to do with the other.
Right. That was the other thing I was going to say. It doesn't directly, but obviously all these things are connected. What he's going to say now, we're going to have to really think about. It's a big concept, but it's interesting. Okay, so he says like this: Vidgal Yira. How do you reveal Yira? Already, you're hearing something from Rabbi Nachman, which is important to know. Is it's already inside of you. Because here he doesn't say you need to acquire it. He doesn't say you need to build it. He says you need to reveal it. So it's something which is inside of you, and something is keeping it on the down low. It's keeping it entrapped. All you need is for barren women to conceive. Hopefully nobody stops the lesson at this point. Yeah, and it starts to act on that, especially if you're single, because it's probably not going to be. You're not going to end up in the place that Rabbi Nachman wants you to end up in. Okay, what you're going to see is Rabbi Nachman has a tremendous chiddush on how to make women pregnant. It has nothing to do with sexual relations. Okay, ki ayadei leida, through pregnancy or giving birth, nidgala yira, awe is revealed. How do we see this? Because it's in Tilim, Rada chazatam shem chayil ki yoleida. Trembling seized him, the pangs of birth. Pangs like birth. Meaning, ayadei leida, through giving birth, goes out damim and gevura, goes out judgments and blood. In Kabbalah, red is always referring to din. And most specifically in the area of dam, of blood. We know in the month of Elul, everyone knows the famous Torah Vav, speaks about the fact that this is the month of Tshuva, this is the month of fixing the Brit before Rosh Hashanah. How do you do that? It's actually by getting embarrassed or going through a difficulty and having to endure it with silence. Okay, what happens? Because he says that Kabbalistically, your blood is getting released from your heart, right? You're having all these emotions, they're rising up for you. And then, so to speak, it's like splurting out, okay? Yeah, when you're silent. If you're not, it stays there or it gets strengthened. Why do we got to get them out? because blood represents judgments. He really wants to get out the judgments. He wants to get out the dinim. Because what's the problem with judgments? They conceal the light of God from you. So instead of thinking it in some type of like maladaptive way, we'll just think about it like very simply. Chasadim is revelation of God. And dinim is concealment of God. So we don't want dinim, we want dinim sweetened. The truth is that when you sweeten judgments, it's a greater revelation than from the chasadim. Okay? So when you're confronted by difficulties, instead of feeling like, okay, there's something really wrong, instead I can have a paradigm shift, which is I have a greater opportunity to reveal godliness in this place. I just have to figure out how to sweeten these judgments. So he says, when a woman gives birth, she's releasing all of the judgments. That goes out the blood, and blood is the concept of yira. Right? In Kabbalah, yira is blood, dinim, judgment, red. Interesting, because if you notice all across the world,
Yira is what you want it.
We want it.
You want it, and yet here we're saying, get it out of you.
No, so we need it because that's the whole point. It needs to be revealed. It's trapped in the woman. She needs to release the blood, meaning to reveal the fear or to reveal the awe. It needs to be revealed. So yeah, it sounds like we need her to get rid of it, but it's not a getting rid of it, it's a revealing it for us. So we're going to see more specifically how that works here. When this woman who is barren becomes pregnant, the blood and these gevurot that have been contained within her up to this point, they're now going out, but with more force. So the longer that a woman has been barren, the greater is the force and the more blood that's coming in the time of the birth. So now let's go back for a second and let's think, is there any example of this in the Torah where a woman has a hard time giving birth for a long time? Sarah, very good. So now Rabbi Nachman is going to say something unbelievable. When Yitzchak was born, when was Yitzchak conceived? Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah. So we're going to see how all these things are connected.
And he's Gvura.
And he's Gevurah. He is awe of God. Now, how did he become so awesome? Because Sarah couldn't give birth for 90 years. There's a huge chiddush.
When like all this blood was, so to speak, contained in it, they couldn't get revealed.
Yes.
So it was like a volcano. It was like waiting for that.
Yeah, and then when it did, it was Yira Shalem. It was pure Yira. He was born in the land of Israel. He never left the land of Israel. He's Kedusha. He's Tahara. He's like awesome. He's awesome. Okay? Yitzhak is also very messianic in the teachings of Hasidus and Kabbalah. He represents laughter, right? And in this world, you're not allowed to laugh. There's some suffering in this world. The future is the time of laughter. Yitzhak is the time of the future. Something Yira, awesome. Rabbi Nachman says right now in exile, we only have Emet. We don't even have Yira, which is why we have the white strings and we don't have the Techelet on our tzitzit. Techelet represents Yira, awe. White represents Chesed, kindness, or truth. We have that. Okay? So why was Yitzchak so awesome? Specifically because it took Sarah so long to give birth. So already we should get some tremendous chizuk in our life. That on the one hand, these things that we want to happen, whether it's to get married, or to have kids, or to have the right job, or to finally be able to learn the way I want to, or pray the way I'd like to, whatever it is, or having amuna, or bitachon, whatever madrega I'm looking for, trying to move to the land of Israel, whatever it is, and it's taking longer. So we usually see this as like the bane of our existence, right? Why is this taking so long? But on the other hand, we can understand from this, the longer it takes when you get it, the greater it is. Now you might think you want it right away, but when you pray to Hashem for it and you're crying for it, Hashem knows you want it in a good way. It doesn't just think you want it stam, like I'm going to go get a candy from a candy shop and just as soon as I eat it, it's gone. He wants you to really appreciate it. You know, like I was dumped by so many girls growing up, rejected and alienated and ostracized. And this was so painful for me because, you know, you develop what they call core beliefs like as a kid. And those beliefs are something that may maintain within you your whole life unless you actively work on them. whether that's through Chassidus or whether you got therapy, maybe a combination. So what was a core belief that came up for me? I'm not lovable. I'm gonna start crying. No, I'm just kidding. It's gonna get weird right now. Okay, so I'm not lovable, and I didn't believe in God then, so I didn't have like any type of outlet. I was just like, "What's wrong with me?" I really didn't understand. Like, okay, I'm not the best looking person. I'm not the tallest. I'm not the most, fit. I'm not like excellent anywhere, but I'm not like the worst. So like, what? what? Why can't I just get like a decent looking girl who has like kind of nice and likes me? Why can't I find that? And then when I finally found my first real girlfriend, who was my wife, she trounced all of them. I mean, like if you took, first of all, those women would have been the end of my life. I would have ended up being, married to a non-Jew and having non-Jewish kids, and that was the least of it. But I ended up finding my wife by the Yam Suf, literally in Eilat, and she saved my life. She brought me Hashem, she brought me Torah, she brought me humility, she brought me simplicity, she brought me kids, she brought me feeling full and being loved. But why do I appreciate her so much that every single day now, for over half a decade, I'm saying thank you to Hashem with tears in my eyes that I have my wife? It was because for 20 years I couldn't find anybody. So it's more awesome for me now. Yitzhak needed to be awesome. Sarah didn't know that. Sarah just wanted to have a kid. But Hashem knew that Sarah wanted the best kid because she was going to be the Jewish people was going to come from him. So he needed to be really awesome. So how's that going to happen? There's got to be a lot of blood there. There's got to be a lot of judgments there. It's got to take a lot of time. And then when it finally happens, it's geudik. It's redemptive. It's awesome. So now, the Midrash.
Not all of us can. I don't want to cut you off.
Yeah, go ahead.
But not all of us can. You can't do,
well, you don't even know how you do it yet.
Yeah, okay. So it's not computer. So you can't do that every.
It's not like let's stop the recording and let me.
It's not every shady you tell me. So it must be like kind of like the osher, the richness is obviously it's not money. So then this is not money then.
What is it?
So this is not computer either.
It's not. This for sure is not pshuta in the sense of the way that because okay. So we're gonna get there in a second. I don't want to ruin it, but no, you're doing good.
That's what we're building up.
Yeah, we're building up to there, and it's taking time because it's gonna be awesome. That's the whole point.
It's gonna take 9 years.
I mean, if you want it to be kind of awesome, then we'll do it in a few minutes. But if you want it to be really awesome, I'm gonna move in here, and you'll have to wait, a few years for me to get this out of my mouth. Okay, so now think about that midrash, that famous midrash that when Sarah conceived, all of the women conceived. It said it's a very bizarre midrash. All the women started conceiving when Sarah conceived. Okay? Because Rabbi Nachman says when Sarah was granted this special providence, which is the awe of Yitzchak, which happened on Rosh Hashanah, numerous barren women were granted this providence with her. Because I born him as a son in his old age. The birth of Yitzchak, who is the revelation of Yira, brings to length of days. Now it's so interesting. Because Abraham calls him and Sarah calls him the son that I born in my old age. Who else do we talk about like that? He's the Ben Zekuni. Yosef. In Kabbalah, it's explained that the Yesod is the place which holds all the Chasadim, but also the place that holds all the Gevurah. And it's also explained that all of the secrets with which Yosef knew, his special ability to understand and to interpret dreams and to have very deep revelations of godliness, they're all derived from Gevurah, from Yitzchak. So in some sense, they're both very similar, and actually they're conceived in a similar way, where both their parents said the same thing, in my old age. And now we're learning that old age doesn't mean you're physically old. I mean, it could also mean that, but what it really means is you have length of days. Yitzchak is the product of length of days. And Yosef is the product of length of days, which is this place of Keter. They come from this very high place. And the aspect of Yirat Shemayim prolongs 1 day, which is what Shalom Melech says. All right, so we see very clearly that when Rabbi Nachman says, what brings you to this length of days to be able to add Kedusha to the hours of your days in a sustainable, in a healthy, in a lively way, it comes from Yirat Shemayim. Okay, now, to be able to understand this next section, I'm going to tell you a story, and then we're going to be able to, B'ezrat Hashem, hopefully understand how to do this in a way which is kosher. Okay, so here's the story. One time there was a guest, and he visited a householder. Came into his house, and the guest asked the householder, because he looked at his house, he goes, nice house. He goes, how do you make your living? So the householder told him, the Balabayit said, I don't have a fixed income. The world gives me what I need to sustain. Okay, so it sounds like he probably went to like Seattle. He was hanging out by some hippie's house, right? So the guest goes, oh, interesting. He goes, okay, so what do you learn? Sounds like maybe he's a Talmud Chacham. Maybe that's what he means. He means literally people just pay for me and I learn. And they start having a conversation and they're connecting on a very deep level. And before he knows it, the householder starts to have this tremendous yearning to reach very high spiritual levels, which he never had before. It just like popped up in the middle of this conversation. And then the guest said to him, I'll teach you. He didn't say anything to him. He just said, I'll teach you. And all of a sudden, the householder got spooked. And he starts thinking to himself, is this even a person? What's going on right now? But he hunkered down and he said, no, I'm going to believe in this person. And I'm going to start calling him Rebbe. And he starts teaching him. And they're talking and he's teaching him. And then all of a sudden, the householder said, can you please stay longer? He said, I can't, I have to go. He said, well, first, can you just teach me? I need to know how to show you respect. Because this is something that people are not very meticulous in, but it's very important to show your Rebbe respect, to have yira of him. And I want to know how to do it with you because I have tremendous reverence for you. He said, I'm sorry, I don't have time, I have to go. Another time I'll teach you. And he goes, oh, that's also something that I want you to teach me. How do I know how far to take you out of the Tichum? Because there's a halacha about how far should you take your teacher out when he's in your home? How far should you bring him out? Can you tell me how far I should take you? He said, you should take me to the entrance. All of a sudden, the householder starts thinking to himself, but if I leave my house, I'm not with people anymore. And I don't even know if this person's real. And it's a little scary. Yeah. So the householder, because they had gotten so close in this one conversation, the householder said to the guest, to be honest, I'm scared, I'm afraid to take you outside. So the guest responded to him, if I could teach you like I teach you, then anything I want to do with you, who's going to stop me? And the householder was taken aback, and he felt overawed by him, and he walked him outside. As soon as he walked him outside, the guest grabs him, seizes him, and they start flying. And they're flying through the sky. And, I don't know if you've ever been flying in the sky before, but it's very cold up there. So he goes, ooh, I'm cold. The guest said, here, take this. And he gave him a garment. He said, wear this because it's going to be really good for you. You'll have food, you'll have drink. You'll even be able to live in your house. They didn't understand anything he's saying, but he's overawed by him. So he puts on the garment. And the next moment, he's back in his house. Not with the guest, almost like nothing happened. And he's bugging out. And he's looking around, he sees his family around him, eating like normal, talking, whatever. And he's he's thinking about that guy, what just happened? And before he knows it, he's flying again with him. And this keeps going back and forth. He's back in his house, and he's flying. And he's back in his house, flying. And he's thinking to himself, what's going on right now? Next thing he knows, the guest has him, brings him, flies him to a valley, which is situated between two mountains. In the valley, there's a book. This is how Mormonism started. No, I'm just kidding. It's kind of like that. But he takes the book and he opens up the book and he sees their letters, Hebrew letters, Aleph, Zayin, Chet, Dalet. And he also sees in the book pictures of vessels, kelim. And in those vessels, there's letters, which are making those vessels. They're made from those letters. He's seeing it all in the book, and he has this tremendous yearning to want to study this book. And as soon as he has that yearning, he's back in his house. And he goes, I got to tell somebody what's going on right now with me. But then he thinks to himself, but how can I say this to anyone? They're not going to believe me. Next thing he knows, he's back in the valley with the book. And he's thinking, well, I don't know how long I'm going to be here this time. I should go find habitation. So he goes up the mountain. And when he goes up the mountain, he finds a tree there. The tree has branches that are made of gold. And on the bottom of these branches, there are vessels. Same vessels that were in the book. And he's looking in the vessels, and there's vessels inside the vessels. And he tries to take the vessels off the tree to take it back with him, but he can't because they're entangled too much in the tree. Next thing he knows, he's back home. And he looks outside his window, and he sees the guest there, peering through the window. And the householder starts to say to the guest through the window, come inside, come inside. He said, I can't, I don't have time, I'm on my way to you. He goes, that's amazing. How could you be on your way to me? I'm right here. And then he explains to him, the guest tells the householder, he said, listen, as soon as you decided to leave with me and go to the entrance with me, I took your neshama. I took the highest part of your soul and I enclosed it with the lower Gan Eden. And I let you keep your nefesh. The reason why you keep going to the mountain and keep coming back is because your neshama is in your mind. Now that it's enclosed, you have the power that wherever you think about, you're there, mamash. And that place illuminates you. And then when you stop thinking about that place, because your nefesh is with you, you're back home. And the householder says to himself, I don't know where this person's from, but he's definitely from the world of good. That's the end of the story. And that's how you make women pregnant. Rabbi Nachman says, "Ufakidut akarot naaseh yadei shorin et bnei adam mishnatam." The way that you make women pregnant is by waking people up from their sleep. Because many people are sleeping away their days, Rabbi Nachman says. And even if it appears to them that they're not, and they're odim of Hashem, they're serving Hashem. They're oskim b'Torah, they learn Torah, tefillah, they pray. Afal piken kol avdatan ein l'Hashem yiparach nacha mehem. But in truth, Hashem's not getting any nacha from any of it. Ouch. Kinishako avdatam lamata, because all their service is remaining below. Ve'ein yachol litromem litalut lamala. It's incapable of rising and ascending higher. Because their devotions lack chiyut, it lacks life force. In the Zohar, it's explained that every mitzvah is like creates a malach, right? But for it to ascend high, it needs wings. So what are the wings of the mitzvah? The wings are your love of Hashem and your awe of Hashem. When you do a mitzvah with love and awe of Hashem, you gave the mitzvah wings, and now it can ascend up higher. Apparently, if I don't, I have the mitzvah, and there will be schut for the mitzvah, but it's not ascending up, which is also why I don't feel any chiyut as I'm doing the mitzvah, because it's not flying. Rabbi Nachman says that where is the chiyut of a mitzvah come from? It comes from your seichel, it comes from your intellect. But very often a person's mind is what he's called mochin the katan, in a contracted or constricted consciousness, which Rabbi Nachman says is the bechina of sleep. And when a person's asleep and he's serving Hashem, his avoda cannot rise up. because he doesn't have chiyut. Now, how does a person fall asleep? They can listen to me teach. I'm just kidding. There's two main ways Rabbi Nachman says. One is, one way is, what makes people sleep is taivot. Engaging in taivas, right? You said, how do I get yira? And you explained that there's different taivas that you need to avoid, and that helps you with your yira. So I'm going to try to make it simple. The physical world is a means to an end. When I use it as an end in and of itself, it becomes a block. I become insensitive, right? You'll notice that if you eat too much, you don't want to learn after that. And even if you do, it loses its tom, right? Or let's say, I wasted seed. You see, all your motivation just goes right out the window, right? To do anything. That's why boxers, they never waste seed, like in their months of boxing before they fight, because they would lose their motivation. You know about that, okay? Who knows?
Is that a real thing?
That's a real thing.
Wow.
Yeah. Why do you think Mike Tyson was so good?
There was like,
He was the master of the Brit. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. Yeah, what?
Even Breslov.
I think there was this one that was saying his secret is to be a guy with a bris. That's how he gets his motivation.
Okay, I mean there is a thing that when I fall really bad, it does sometimes that's what motivates me to actually I know for me, like my biggest progression spiritually didn't come like when I was feeling really good. It was like when I was at rock bottom and I just couldn't solo it anymore. And I was like, I have to make like a big change in my life. Up until then, it's like, yeah, I'd like to not do this anymore. And then I do it. And I'd like to not do that. Yeah, but I'm not.
There's like a barak, and then someone like hits you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
It
just like,
gets your mind to snap.
yeah, it just makes you like, right,
This person with his own.
at his
Well,
level.
Like
No,
it breaks your autopilot.
Right. So in this case, taivot, whether it's taiva for money or whether it's taiva for food or whether it's taiva for sex or whatever the taiva is for, taivas, they cause you to feel a lack of sensitivity towards spirituality. You'll even notice, like, what's one of the reasons on Yom Kippur this is the highest day of kedusha? What's the mechanism that Chazal gave us to be able to tap into that? They do it through us not eating and not drinking. By not engaging in the physical aspect of me, answer. Delivery. By not engaging in this physical aspect of me, my spiritual senses are heightened. Okay? And also when you just do actions that are destructive, whatever those actions might be, all of those things cause a person to go to sleep. That's why out of nowhere you'll find that like you might be on fire, and then the next moment you just lost all of it. You probably like right before that you like ate too many slices of pizza. And it might take you days or even weeks or even months before you feel that feeling again. Because what we're going to see is it's not as simple as once I'm asleep, I can just wake up. It's actually a very difficult process to wake up.
Do you think like taivas could help someone?
In what way?
Maybe it's already not within the guidelines of taiva, but sometimes pizza could help someone serve Hashem, maybe.
Right, so in that case, not a taiva.
That's
right.
using it.
Right, so that's using it for its designated purpose. In which case, it gives you chiyut, it gives you life force.
Whenever I'm like in a good seder, take a piece of bread and vegetables and a little bit of eggs in the morning.
Yeah.
A little bit of stick to nuts and dates.
Yeah.
That day, I might roll like this day, something that much food.
Right.
I'll go in the basement and I'll feel great.
Yeah.
The moment I kind of like there's leftover pizza from the night before, and I'm like, oh, I'll just eat pizza. And I'm like,
You feel that? Yeah, you feel done.
I'm like, that's it.
Right.
I was like, oh, why did I do that?
Put you to sleep.
But every time it teaches me like just stay away.
Right. Right. So there's a way, because it's physical. The whole point is because it's physical. That's the nature of physicality. Once it's used excessively, that's when it starts to hurt you. Rabbi Nachman once said people think that there's a lot of people that die from undereating. He said many more people die from overeating than from undereating. Because in Kabbalah they explain that klipot is the concept of motarot, which means excess. If I am, so to speak, like let's say I'm eating food, and I eat the amount that I need, then I'm drawing life force from the food. There's godly life force which is in the food, I'm drawing it into myself. At the moment in which I'm overeating, then actually the food starts taking the life force from me, which is why you're getting tired. It starts drawing it from you, right? So it has the opposite effect, as if I never ate at all. This is worse, which is what Rabbi Nachman said. Okay? So now we're going to have to figure out, how does a person wake up? This, Rabbi Nachman says like this. It's impossible for him to rouse him unless he stirs on his own. Okay, so the first step is you have to actually rouse yourself. It's not enough for something to happen outside of you, or if you need to wait for Hashem to help you. You actually need to make the first move. What you're going to see, though, is that it's not enough for you to make the first move. Okay? But you first have to make that move. In Kabbalah, they explain that all shefa from above needs to be preceded from shefa from below. What they call mayin duchrin or mayin nukvin, male waters, feminine waters. It's these feminine waters, which practically means I'm taking action on my own, meaning I'm in a place of struggle, or I'm in a place of conflict, or I'm feeling lethargic, and I'm waiting, hoping that Hashem is going to help me. You actually have to first make that first step. I have to force myself to move out of this space, even though once you do that, where you go from there, that's not in your hands anymore. Hashem's going to take you the rest of the way. But you have to first make that step. Okay? It's just that when he stirs himself on his own, if there's no one attempting to rouse him, he's going to keep on sleeping. So here we have a very deep yesod, that it's not even just enough for me to try to wake up from whatever slumber that I'm in. I need someone simultaneously trying to wake me up while I'm trying to wake myself up. Then, as soon as he stirs, it's necessary to show him his face, Rabbi Nachman says. So this is a very wondrous part of the lesson. He needs to show you your face.
Your own face.
Yeah, your countenance. Because Rabbi Nachman explains that one's countenance, their face, is their intellect. That's why we say, how do you Makayim Beinu's lesson to see the face of a tzaddik? When he's obviously referring to himself. When you learn his Torah.
Show you your own face.
Well, in this case, it's about showing him your own face. But the reason why showing you your own face can be done through showing you what we're going to learn is Torah, or intellect, that's going to wake you up, is because the person's chokhmah is their face. That's why when tzaddikim, you see their face is luminous many times, because their chokhmah is literally shining through their face.
I'm just kind of sorry, real quick. It's kind of funny that 5 years ago, kind of roughly around the time I started, just before I started getting into Breslov, I was kind of going through this really heavy period where I just was not happy, down and down and down. And there was one point where I kind of decided, I would just decide I have to look myself in the mirror.
Wow.
And I noticed I wouldn't make eye contact with myself. And okay, I'm gonna make eye contact with myself, and I hated it because I'd have to like look at myself, which would cause me to cry like crazy.
Wow.
Just looking. But until I noticed, I would do it almost daily, until I just was okay, and I'd even smile back at the person I was looking at. It took me a while to be like, I can look at this guy, I can accept this person.
Wow.
So there it is.
Deep. And it's interesting you say that, because Rabbi Nachman says elsewhere, we did this together. Nassim was there. Rabbi Nachman says, why do you need this great tzaddik? What is his benefit to you? He says this in multiple places in Likutey Moharan. His benefit to you is that he lets you see yourself. He's a mirror. Because he's reached this ultimate spiritual level of complete bitul, so there really is no him anymore. And now that there's no him anymore, when you see him, you finally see yourself. And until that,
he can close himself in me, so to speak.
right. He helps you to see yourself, both your good and also what are the barriers that you don't even realize are your barriers. And that's all through seeing yourself. How do you do that? So that's through his intellect, by learning his Torah. That's the mirror. And that's why so often when you learn his lessons, you either realize like, oh my gosh, Hashem's closer to me than I thought he was, or these are things that I really need to work on. Whereas maybe I learn other Torah, it's like, oh, that's an interesting idea. It doesn't move me though. There's something about Rabbi Nachman's Torah that moves me. It moves me to action. It moves me to want to change. It moves me to want to be my best self. What is it about Rabbi Nachman that is causing me to always want to be my best self, whether I'm succeeding in that or not, when I learn his Torah?
The
Right.
funny thing is, it's so hard to understand it. And if you walk away and say, "Hey, I'll tell you Breslov worked from this month," like you're almost unable to say a word.
Right.
There's almost so little you can, other than maybe the stuff at the end of Tanina. We're like, okay, a few little chizuk, simcha, dancing.
Yeah, it's hard to
Other than
understand.
that, 99% is like,
I don't know how to verbalize
looking at
this.
this,
Right. It's hard to verbalize.
but somehow I know it's something big.
Right. Something's happening to you. It like I heard someone once say it with other Torah it tries to help you to get to a certain experience, and you may or may not get there. Whereas Rabbi Nachman is the only Torah that it literally shakes you into the experience without you having to do anything. Now, after that, you then have to go do stuff. But you're just moved into this space, like this das is like shot up into you. Now, what is it about Ravena that's allowing him to do that? It's the fact that he's not there. He's a mirror. He's such a mirror that when you see him, you finally see yourself and like you wake up. Right? So therefore, someone needs to be there to help you to wake up. You can't just try to wake up on your own because you need to see your face. Who's going to show you your face? The person is waking you up. Now, when we want to show a person his countenance and rouse him from his sleep, you need to enclose that face, though, through the telling of stories. Because his face is a very big light. And when a person's waking up from the sleep, right, if it's dark in the room, it's been dark in the room for a long time, and all of a sudden they shine a very bright light, not only is it not pleasant, it can actually damage the person. So in this case, I need to have somebody waking me up, but I need the person who's waking me up to show me myself, and I need him to do it in a way that it's concealed, that it's contracted, that it's enclosed. And he enclosed it through stories.
What, like literal stories?
Like the story I just told you.
That was a good one.
It's not my story. Rabbi Nachman said it to his...
Or I think someone like this Sikorim Nasatim.
It's in Chaim Moharan. Rabbi Nachman said it over to his Hasidim in Hanukkah. I think it was 1807. And the first night of Hanukkah, he told them this story. And there's no commentary on it. Rabbi Nachman said, yeah, it's just there at the end of the story. Rabbi Nachman concluded by saying, and he hasn't finished yet. It's not over yet. Like something. The reason I actually told you that story was because my son, right before I left, he goes, tell him that story you told me, because I told him the story a couple of days ago. You just see my son's face. He's 7 years old as he's hearing. I don't have time. I don't have time to get to you because I'm on my way to you. His face started contorting in all these different directions. He goes, what are you saying? How can he? And he actually had a chiddush that he's on his way to him, meaning he's really in the mountain. He's not really at home. The chiddush was he's on his way to him where he really is, which is now in the valley between those two mountains. That's what he meant. And I'm like here with you at some lower. I don't know. My son was like, "Wow, it's unbelievable."
And obviously, not to think too much. I want to go as high as possible, but then when I go too high, you can have the home is pretty darn important part of life.
Yeah,
it's
sure.
Pretty it teaches you a lot.
Yeah, sure.
So much. It's such a critical ingredient. So it's not that you're trying to run away from home.
No, that's why I said take this garment. You'll be able to live in your house.
In both places.
One thing that I think that you get from the story, which is pretty clear from Rabbi Nachman's teachings and from Hasidus in general, is the ultimate life, a good life, is one in which your feet are on the ground but your head is in the sky. Yeah. And in that way, then your home life is amazing because it's infused with inspiration and it's infused with meaning. It's chashuv now. But if my feet are here and my head's also here, it's too heavy, right? So this is what the tzaddik is telling him in the story. I told my son, he goes, what does the story mean? I said, I don't know, but I think for sure the guest is Rabbi Nachman. And beyond that, I don't really know exactly. Yeah. He's from the place of good. And he's not done yet, with whatever he's doing. When did he start telling stories? So he told them, Badavka, you guys are not waking up. I'm going to have to start telling you stories, which is very bizarre. It seems like a downgrade, right? These were not like us, Pasha the Yiddim, like the teacher tells you, I'm going to start telling you stories. We're so happy, like finally, stop telling a story, tell us stories, great, we got food, your stories, get a pillow. These were like Kabbalists.
One of these Talmidim, he goes, Rebbe, I can make you make, he couldn't find him, I can make you make here. He goes, yeah, thanks a lot, but you can't dunk in it.
Yeah.
I mean, they were huge people.
They were huge people. And they were excited to hear those stories. Why? Because these stories were very deep. They were coming from Atik Yomin, Ancient of Days. And in fact, when Rabbi Nachman told this story, he said that there are 3 things that people say are not true, which I'm going to tell you are true. One is, people say that stories put you to sleep, but I say that stories wake you up. People will tell you that stories don't make women pregnant, but I'll tell you that stories make women pregnant.
That's exactly what we're talking about.
That's exactly what
That's
we're
right.
talking about. That's why I told you the
What
story.
happened to this year?
Yeah, that's good. And finally, he said, and people say that tzaddik doesn't need any money, but I said that tzaddik needs all the wealth in the world. And then he told this Torah lesson. How much would you pay to be by him for any of these? Just these, I don't know. Every time I hear it, Rabbi Nachman says, anyone who just speaks to me becomes like a newborn babe. So true. I feel like new life, new energy, anything's possible. It's an amazing thing. You're so awesome. Speaking about Yitzchak, once someone, I forget what it was, Rav Natan named his first son Yitzchak. And they said, how could you not name your son after Rabbi Nachman? And he said, what, you don't think that Rabbi Nachman is Yitzchak?
Yeah.
He said, trust me, his name is Yitzchak. And in fact, when Rabbi Nachman used to travel and he used to pretend he wasn't him, he would go by the name Yitzchak. He was awesome. So, it's the face needs to be enclosed within stories. Now, when people, like if you're going, like I know for me, when I'm going through a tough time, and even like Likutey Moharan's not doing it for me, there's only one thing that's going to do it for me. It's Sipur Masya. I tell a story, and I don't even mean to. My son asked me for a story, I tell him a story, and all of a sudden, I totally change after that. Like I get renewed energy and motivation and excitement, and I told the story a million times before. And what's the reason and everyone has the same, I feel like this is me somehow. Like when you hear The Lost Princess, somehow you feel like that's you. How that is that that's you would never be able to articulate that. But I feel like I'm the viceroy in that story, or I feel like I'm the princess in this story, or whatever it is. But I feel like I'm that person. So how is that? Because that really is your face. Right. That's the next story we're going to do. Right? The disabled one, right? I really also feel like that one because I also have disabilities. But what is that? He's showing you your face, but he's enclothing it tremendously. It's this combination. And Rabbi Nachman says in the 30th lesson of Likutey Moharan, why do you need such a great teacher? Why can't I just have a guy who just knows more than me? Like a lot of people do. Let me get the guy who's like part of the Kollel. He knows Shas and Shulchan Aruch. I don't. Let me just learn from him, and like it's good enough. Rabbi Nachman says it's a big mistake. The further you are from Hashem, the greater of a teacher you need. And what's the reason? Because he says that this person needs to be able to have dual capabilities. He needs to be able to go up very, very high, which very few people can do. And he needs to be able to go down very, very low. Meaning he needs to be able to draw Torah from a higher place for you because you're further away. That's the only thing that's going to wake you up. But he needs to be able to then enclose it at your level, which is as hard or harder than actually going up and getting it. Okay? So this is what we're learning here. It's not just that Rabbi Nachman is able to take down this Torah from Atik Yomin, he's able to make twisted children fables from it. That somehow when I hear these stories, I want to do tshuva. I want to start over again. I want to renew myself. Okay. The Torah is very, very long. I want to move to the end of the Torah, where Rabbi Nachman speaks about how this is related to Rosh Hashanah. Okay, this is beyond what we've spoken about. So Rabbi Nachman says like this. This is all the bechina of the shofar. The shofar is the concept of hitoru t'shena. The Arizal's teachings about Rosh Hashanah, it's all about going to sleep. It's all about Adam Rishon. It's all about him going to sleep and Hashem severing him from Chava, right? Separating them. That's a very deep, deep, deep thing that's going on in that Torah over there. And that's all the concept of Rosh Hashanah. The beginning of the year, Hashem is putting you into a comatose state. The reason is because in that place of sleep, there's something that you need to be able to do. Or to put it more simply, you can't wake up if you're not sleeping, which is kind of what we were speaking about before. I can't make a big progress in my life unless I really mess up. I cannot wake up unless I'm sleeping. Amazing thing. Gotta fall asleep to wake up. And that's Rosh Hashanah. Now, what is the mechanism for waking you up? It's the shofar blast. So that's the concept of stories. All of these stories are like a shofar blast. What does the shofar do? It arouses your mind. It arouses your seichel. In the fifth Torah of the Moharan, which is the first Rosh Hashanah Torah Rav Natan ever heard, Rabbi Nachman explains that for you to be able to be happy, to do the mitzvot with joy, you need to shake the crookedness out of your heart. Because like we said before, the heart is the place of joy. But there's something that's interfering with you being able to experience that. Rabbi Nachman says you need to draw mochin into your heart. You need to draw from your intellect into your heart. How do you do that? He says through the shofar, which means practically you need to scream to Hashem. When you scream to Hashem, it's like literal thunder. And that causes, like the Zohar says, these clouds to draw down moisture, rain. It comes from screaming, with the shofar blast. So the Gemara says, what's the whole point of thunder? There's really no reason for thunder, except to give you a sense of feeling awe, right? Straighten out the crookedness of the heart. That's how you bring the awe in. It's all about rectification of the heart. This is all through the shofar. That's why the three sounds, tekiah, which is the concept of absence of speech. Rabbi Nachman ends up saying it's these stories that when they arouse you, what's the practical nafkamina? What's the difference between now I'm awake and I was sleeping before? Now you're able to speak. Whereas previously it's difficult, right? The Ariya teaches the whole exile in Mitzrayim, which is really our exile, is the exile of speech. Why is there an exile of speech? Because das is in exile. Because intellect is in exile. Which part?
Exile of speech. Like,
what does it mean?
Mitzrayim, bunch of
right.
Whole story sounds pretty awful. No, just speech was a big deal.
Right. So so there's a few points here. One is that you notice that as soon as the Jewish people start screaming out to Hashem, Hashem sends Moshe. And not before that. So clearly something happened when they all spoke up to Hashem. The Ramchal actually says in his Ma'amar on the Geula, he explains that when the Torah speaks about how when they start screaming out to Hashem, and then they see that Hashem is with them, it's not that he's now with them, it's that before they couldn't see it. And when they screamed out to Hashem, they were able to actually see that the whole time he was with them. And that was the beginning of them leaving exile. Very Rabbi Nachman-esque. Okay? So for us too, what does it mean? It means in their exile, in our personal exile, when we don't feel like talking to Hashem, or when our talking to Hashem is lacking truth and genuinity, or it's lacking fervor. Why is it lacking that? Why is it so hard for me to do Ibodadu? Why is it hard for me to talk to Hashem? Why is it so hard for me to mean what I say? Why is it so hard for me after this conversation is over for me to feel like it changed me? Because speech is an exile for you. Because your intellect is sleeping. How does one wake up the intellect? You do it through screaming. Or you do it through a shofar blast. Or you do it through the hearing of stories. That's what arouses you. And that's the first. That's tekiah. You have an absence of speech. That's why the pasuk says takata. If you have shaken hands with a stranger, you've been trapped by the words of your own mouth. Meaning to say, absence of speech. But then you have trua, which is the concept of speech itself. Like the pasuk says, the tzaddik's lips, yerua, they provide sustenance for the many. Right? So this concept of trua is the concept of speech. So you went from non-speech, then through the shofar blast itself, you get to speech. And then finally, you have sivra, shvarim, right? Which is concept of trust. We didn't get to this point of the lesson, but he explains that when people start talking to Hashem, then all the people who really trust in Hashem, they're positively affected in the generation. They're able to do certain things. So, meaning there's a big impact, not just beyond what you're personally experiencing when you're finally able to talk to Hashem, but these people who really trust in Hashem, have always trusted in Hashem, there's a positive impact that happens with them when you start speaking. It's like their ammunition or their fuel to be able to do what they need to do for the generation. Okay? And now all of this is the shofar, which is the rousing of sleep. It brings the unbinding of the mouth. It makes those who are mute be able to speak. And also those who are barren are able to give birth, because those are two of the same things. Right? Rabbi Nachman says that the hardest prayer you're ever going to experience to get answered is the first one. Because he compares tefillah to birth. And like in the beginning, I'm praying, maybe Rabbi Nachman got me inspired to pray. But do I really believe that like Hashem's going to answer my prayer? That takes like time. It takes a lot of learning. It takes a lot of growth. It takes a lot of bittul, getting knocked down on the ground and like, I need you, Hashem. I really, really need you. Before finally he answers me. So what's that whole thing? And why is it that it's like so intense right before I finally get my prayer answered? Like I reach the point of no return. That's the only time I scream out to Hashem, I get my prayer answered. It's like birth, right? First you heard you're conceived. You tell everybody, hey guys, I started doing Ibodah, dude. It's great. Everything is good. But nothing actually happened to you. And then all of a sudden, it's hard for you to start talking to Hashem. And you don't know what happened to you. It's just like, where did it go? I don't know. And you go back to it. But it's painful because you're actually exerting yourself for the first time truly with all your heart and soul, and you're not getting answered. It's the most painful thing you can have. That's like the last trimester. And then finally, you're about to give birth. And you have all of these birth pangs. It's the most painful time. Nothing's working out for you. This thing is not working. That thing's not working. And I'm feeling like crunched on all sides. And I finally just say words of truth. They finally come out of my mouth, whatever those words of truth are. And then boom, you get your first prayer answered. And Rabbi Nachman says, Mazal tov, you had your bachur, that's your firstborn. Now you might have difficult situations after that. They might be much more difficult than this situation. But it will never be as hard to give birth as it was this first time. Why? Because you never know you could. It's the not knowing that I can, that's the hardest barrier. Once that's out, and I know that I could, even if I have to exert more effort or it takes more time, it's never going to be as hard as that first time. So the concept of speech is the concept of giving birth. Rabbi Nachman says Mashiach is going to have to spend his whole life perfecting his speech, meaning giving birth. All one concept. All these judgments have to come out. And then it's awesome. Okay? All these things are very connected. And now we're going into Rosh Hashanah. Bezrat Hashem. I think we're all going to Uman, everyone at the table. Please Hashem that we make it there, that we have the schut and to be there. And not just that to be there. That's amazing. But I know like for me in my prayers, like I want this trip to wake me up. I don't just want to go. I know that eternally that's going to have an unbelievable impact that I can't possibly imagine. And that's great, but I got to make it there first. To make it there, I need like a big, big arousal. And I'm praying to Hashem very much that we should all have the shofar blast that we all need. He explains elsewhere that this shofar comes from the word as well as shafur, which means beautiful. Something to be beautiful. Right, because elsewhere in this lesson, he's explaining that you need to stay away from false beauty, like Bagama Brit, to be able to have yira. So what's real beauty? It's the shofar blast. It's you screaming to Hashem. That's truly beautiful. This Hashem loves. Your leiv nishbar, your broken heart. You have to connect to that beauty. And Bezrat Hashem, we're all going to experience a new arousal, a new waking up, whatever it is that each of us needs to hear from Hashem, from the tzaddik, the mirror that we all need to look in and to truly see ourselves, the story that we need to hear, the sichot devarim that we need to have with that person. Bezrat Hashem, I hope we all have it in a big way. It's going to be Tav Shin, Pei Dalet. And I spoke about this in a prior lesson, but Pei Dalet is the root of the word Padeh, which means redemption. I'm not one of those like redemptive freaks where I start like connecting everything to Geula. Rabbi Nachman also was not a big fan of this. Neither is the Gemara. But I just as a prayer, I hope that this is a year of Padeh for us. That whatever it is that we feel stuck in, or we feel like we've been trying to give birth for a long time, that we should have a Padeh, we should have a redemption, we should have a Pekida, we should give birth. And with that, to have Yirat Shamayim, because ultimately, once you have Yira, you have everything. King David says that a person who has Yira, he lacks nothing. And that connects back to the beginning of this Torah, where we said, for the greatest contemplation of Torah, you need the greatest amount of wealth. Why? He says, because you need so much wealth that you lack nothing. So you see very clearly from this, what is the wealth? Yirat Shamayim. That's why Rabbi Nachman said, I don't understand.
No
Everyone
one can have all the wealth in the world, so it can't be that for sure time.
Right, so the answer is you can have all the wealth in the world when you have Yira. When you have Yira, you have Shalom. And if you're Shalem, you're whole. You have everything. And then you can contemplate the deepest, deepest, deepest parts of Torah. Bezrat Hashem, we're going to come away with unbelievable Yirat Shamayim that we can bring with us to the whole year. So we can add Kedusha to the hours of our days. This can bring length of days, and not that we get burnt out, and not that we get overwhelmed, and not that it's not sustainable, but it's something true, and it's as real to us and as comfortable to us as getting up and having a cup of coffee, or spending time with our kids, or whatever it is that makes you feel good, connected, and home. Everybody have an amazing Shabbos and safe flight to Uman for Rosh Hashanah. Oh, and you want to do the Siyum?
All right, you finished the Likutey, right?